Welcome. Today we're jumping right into a practical explainer on the EPA's regulations for used oil management. You know, if you manage a facility, work in industrial ops, or maybe you're just stepping into a new compliance role, getting a solid handle on how to manage these materials is absolutely crucial. It protects the environment, sure, but it also protects your organization's bottom line.
So, let's kick things off with a tough question. Are you handling your facility's used oil legally, or are you sitting on a pile of hidden risks? It's super easy to look at a drum of dirty oil sitting in the corner of your shop and just see a trash can. But to environmental regulators, oh, that drum represents a highly monitored substance that demands a very strict chain of custody. To make sense of all this, we're going to track a single drop of oil's journey. We'll cover 1. Defining regulated used oil. 2. Rules for oil generators. 3. Transporting and transferring. 4. Processing standards. 5. Burning and disposal. And finally, 6. The cost of non-compliance. Along the way, we'll check off the exact compliance requirements your facility needs to know at every single step.
Okay, Section 1. Defining regulated used oil.
First things first, what exactly puts you under the regulatory radar? Well, we aren't just talking about the traditional crude oil you pour into a car engine. Whether it's a synthetic hydraulic fluid or a crude-based lubricant, it comes down to two things. First, it has to have been used, and second, because of that use, it's picked up physical or chemical impurities. Think dirt, metal shavings, or water. Once it gets dirty from use, boom, it officially enters this highly regulated life cycle. Now, there is a very fine, invisible line between standard used oil and hazardous waste. Regulators assume used oil is going to be recycled, which keeps the rules somewhat manageable. But if your oil gets mixed with too many halogens, and we're talking about crossing a threshold of just 1,000 parts per million, which is practically nothing, it instantly transforms into hazardous waste. When that happens, incredibly strict, massively expensive disposal laws suddenly apply to you. Keeping those streams separate is a literal game changer.
Section 2. Rules for oil generators. This brings us to the first physical phase, the generators. Basically, if your facility's daily activities produce this used oil, if you drain it, you generate it. Your core duties here are surprisingly straightforward, but you've got to be disciplined. First, store the oil in tanks or containers that are in solid condition. No severe rust, no structural flaws, and absolutely no leaks. Second, you literally have to label every single container and even the underground fill pipes with the exact words, used oil. Not waste oil, not bad oil, just used oil. Finally, you can't just hand it off to some random guy with a truck. You have to use certified professionals who hold a valid EPA identification number.
Now, what if a tank leaks? Your response timeline is totally non-negotiable. Minute 1, you stop the release right at the source. By minute 5, you need to have it contained so it doesn't soak into the soil or water. Within an hour, you're cleaning it up and properly managing all the contaminated rags and dirt. And by day 1, you must repair or replace that leaking equipment before you even think about putting it back into service. Rapid response is mandatory to stop groundwater contamination in its tracks.
Actually, there is one really handy exception to that certified transporter rule we just talked about. If you're a smaller operation, you can legally self-transport up to 55 gallons of your own generated oil at a time. You just throw it in your company vehicle and take it to an approved collection center without needing that special EPA ID. It's a huge lifesaver for routine maintenance tasks.
Moving right along to Section 3. Transporting and transferring safely. Once larger quantities of oil leave your site, transporters and transfer facilities take the baton. These folks are essentially the gatekeepers. Before they load a single drop, they have to verify that halogen levels are safe, meaning under that 1,000 parts per million limit. While the oil is parked at transfer facilities, it has to sit in secondary containment systems, like berms with solid floors. And the paperwork? Every single drop moved needs a paper trail showing who generated it, who transported it, and where it's going. All of this has to be kept on file for 3 full years. Keep this in mind. 35 days is the magic number here. That is the absolute maximum time used oil can sit at a transfer facility. If it sits there for day 36, the EPA legally reclassifies that site as a processor, and trust me, that completely changes the rulebook they have to follow.
Which brings us to Section 4, Processing and Re-refining Standards.
Processing facilities do the heavy lifting. They do the chemical and physical separation to make the oil usable again. Because they handle massive industrial volumes of combustible liquids, their compliance burden is way higher. They have to proactively prepare for the absolute worst. We're talking dedicated emergency alarms, fire control systems, and formal coordination with local police and fire departments. Plus, they need a written contingency plan detailing exactly what to do in a fire or explosion. It is all about total institutional readiness.
At this processor level, accountability is the whole shebang. They're taking in oil from hundreds of different places. So if a shipment comes in or a refined product goes out, there has to be a permanent, meticulously detailed record. It creates this unified chain of custody, and they even have to file reports with regional authorities every 2 years.
Section 5, Burning and Final Disposal.
We've reached the end of the line, burning the oil for energy recovery or safely disposing of it. Now, you might be thinking all oil burns the same, but no way. The EPA splits this into 2 categories. On-specification fuel meets safe limits for heavy metals and flashpoints, so it can be burned pretty freely. But off-specification fuel is a lot dirtier. To stop toxic heavy metals from getting into the air, off-spec fuel can only be burned in highly regulated industrial furnaces or specific utility boilers.
The facilities that burn this oil and the marketers selling it have to systematically analyze the oil's chemistry to prove it meets those specification levels before lighting a match. And if they're handling off-spec oil, they need signed certifications proving the burner is legally allowed to take it. Just like the transporters, they got to keep all these analysis records for 3 years.
Section 6, the cost of non-compliance. So, what does this all mean for you? Why does all this labeling, containing, and testing actually matter to your bottom line? Well, the EPA expressly forbids some of the old-school shortcuts. You absolutely cannot store used oil in unlined dirt pits. You can't spray it on roads to suppress dust, unless your state has a super rare, federally approved program for it. And you can never, ever intentionally mix a toxic, hazardous waste into your used oil just to dilute it. Doing any of this literally poisons the local ecosystem.
And what happens if you just ignore these rules?
If you think these are just annoying paperwork rules you can brush off until an inspector shows up, think again. A single uncontained leak, a missing berm, or using an uncertified transporter can snowball fast. You're looking at severe operational disruptions, regulatory penalties, and incredibly expensive environmental cleanup mandates. A tiny mistake can turn into a massive PR nightmare and a financial black hole for your whole company.
So, I'll leave you with this final thought to take back to your team. Take a walk on the floor of your shop or plant today. Check your containers. Are they labeled exactly right? Are they leak-free? Do you know exactly where that oil goes when it leaves your loading dock? True compliance isn't an accident, and it's not a box you check once a year. It's an intentional, daily practice that protects your business, your people, and the environment. Thanks for hanging out with us, and we'll catch you next time.
If you found this helpful or want to stay updated when this regulation changes, subscribe and support the channel. And if you need the full technical details on this CFR, click the link in the description below. See you next time.